Hello and welcome to the Raptors Republic post-game show. We are live here. I'm your host, Oren Weisfeld, and with me today we have Zarar. Unfortunately, Sahal couldn't be here today. Um, so we just watched the Raptors blow a really not ugly one, and obviously Pascal blows the layup at the end. I'll let you answer it this way. What's the story of the game to you? Is the story that Pascal in the clutch is not looking great? Maybe there's some yips, or is the story that the Raptors just didn't play a good first
No,
half of the
I don't.
game?
I don't think it's Pascal. I mean, I think Pascal's overall game. Maybe you can criticize 6 for 19, a poor shooting game really from him. But what did he? Is that last play not clutch? No, he got to the rim fine. It just luck of the draw, man. He just missed it. It rimmed out. I mean, I don't know how you can possibly say anything about him being clutch. I do think the Raptors don't go to him enough in the right positions. I think if you want to talk about Pascal to start off with, I think the Raptors have not figured out how to best use him, to be honest with you. And it's surprising because we're kind of sort of deep into this process with him being our number one guy for the second year in a row now. And it's pretty clear that when he is on the block in a one-on-one situation, not only is he able to score individually or get good looks, but he's also able to pass out of it. So I fail to understand why that is not more of a starting point in our offense, especially in the half court. So that's about Siakam. What did you think? You think this has a narrative of like Pascal being not clutch?
No, but I think people will definitely say there is. I don't.
People absolutely suck. Most people
People
suck. We
suck.
should know this by now.
No, for sure. No, and I don't think that's the case either. And um you could see that it's getting rough. But I will say, like, if the Raptors are, yeah, it went in and out and he had a great look, but like now this is the third time where he had a really good look and it just didn't go down. So I would say like there's some merit to the idea that maybe he shouldn't take the last shot of the game. Um at this, like, if you want to win, maybe put it in Kyle's hands. Like if we're not talking about development and it's just like who do I think has a better shot, I would probably take Kyle at this point. But I definitely don't think that's the story of the game either. I mean, he didn't have a good game, but overall the Raptors didn't have a good game, and really it was defensively. When we talk about losing to the Timberwolves, I mean, this is just without D'Angelo Russell, this is not a scary team to game plan for, right? So I'm kind of confused as to why they look so unprepared, because yes, on the one hand, it's Karl Anthony Towns and the Raptors have no one to properly match up against Karl Anthony Towns. So that created a lot of double teams, like showing a lot of people at him, stunts, whatever. But still, regardless of that, like, why did it look like the Raptors just didn't, I don't know, it didn't look like they were ready to pressure Towns that much, right?
Well, I think it was. I think defensively, if you want to have a story of this game, it definitely is defense. I mean, well, what did Mini shoot here? We got to make this box score bigger, like 52%. Holy shit! I mean, you score 52% in any game, you're not gonna be in a great position to win. You're gonna need spectacular offensive games to overcome that. So, I mean, there's your answer there. But more specifically, I find the Raptors, the way they are defending the pick and roll, it's like no matter what they do, they're in a bit of a hole. Because if you kind of sag back on the pick and roll, you end up against a situation where you have the opposing team's guard against Baines. And I have lots of clips, man, showing that where their guard used the screen, is in that elbow area against Baines. And at this point, there's no cover there. He can get to the rim pretty much whenever he wants. Baines actually had a half decent defensive game. Honestly, he had some possessions where he looked half decent, but overall, for the entire scope of the game, our bigs were generally poor. So, and even Boucher, when put in that situation today, like picked up a couple of fouls, wasn't able to defend. So their guards getting into the like when even when we are sagging back, their guards getting into the paint, we are almost at their mercy every single time. And on the flip side, when we try to basically play them for the pop, like we did in that Rubio three at the end there, and a couple more shots there, it's equally worse because you have Baines doing some weird closeouts, and we're not even able to defend that. So both options on that play aren't working. And then what makes things even worse is that the Timberwolves did a really good job of like setting off-ball screens to get guys like Beasley open. And those screens were on Lowry, which forced like Baines and those guys to react and get out to Beasley in the corner. And they're just not, it's just asking too much of a guy like Baines to do that. So, I mean, this game is interesting because even though we played a great, sorry, even though we had good defensive stretches by our big men, we still weren't able to come close to stopping an opposing team. And we sound like a broken record, to be honest with you, man, on this show. Is that, yeah, our big men are a big problem for us defensively. And I don't know how much time we even want to spend on that discussion anymore.
Yeah. I mean, so I was gonna highlight one clip later, but it's not even about the big man. Like you said, I agree. Baines had a pretty good defensive game. He wasn't bad either, but maybe it was like you brought up the off-ball screens that they were creating stuff off of, but it felt to me like the Raptors just didn't have their help game down, and it felt like everything was like late or non-existent. So one clip I was going to show was, Terrence Davis was the help man, but I hate to pick on him too much because I've done it plenty, but because he wasn't the only one who's guilty of this, where the person who had to help wasn't making their decision. So either help and actually step into the lane and make them make a play, which I think the Raptors did really well in the third quarter. And that's when they were forcing a lot of turnovers, is when you put a lot of pressure on the ball and you're basically saying, okay, yes, there's open guys on the perimeter, but you have to make a play, like going downhill on the move with the ball, dribbling. You have to make like a nice read. And the Timberwolves had a lot of trouble doing that when there was a lot of pressure on the ball. But it felt like too often the Raptors just didn't commit to the help. So they would kind of be in no man's land, like either take away the pass and play them one-on-one, or put pressure on the ball and actually double. But it felt like, to me, too often it was people were helping, were just ball watching and kind of stuck in no man's land. They didn't really know exactly their role, what it should be on any given play.
This clip for you. I mean, this is again a situation where our big man Boucher in this case is hanging back, and their guard is just too quick against him. Like he does he does the right thing, quote unquote, of hanging back and not pressuring too much, but at the same time he doesn't prevent the guard from turning the corner and getting to the rim. So even when we are doing the right thing on paper, the result is still negative. And here's one play that just mind-boggling to me, man. This is like at the end of the game. I believe this is man, I gotta find this one, man. I think this is the one where Cat is on. Yeah, here it is. It's an out of bounds play. The Timberwolves are bringing it out of bounds, and for whatever reason, no, I don't have the clip right now, but whatever reason, Fred is guarding Cat on the out of bounds play. So of course Cat gets an easy score because he's got Fred from the start. So when you see things like that, like what the hell, man? That's like, it's not even like you had to react in open play to get to be in that situation. That was your default configuration from the start, and that was like really alarming to me.
Yeah, there is a lot of weird stuff like that I question, but like in live ball situations, I'm constantly surprised by the amount of just mistakes they're making, where like this wasn't like what changed the game necessarily, but like too often two guys will like go out to a shooter and just not communicate that like one of them has to take the shooter and one of them has to take the ball handler or whatever. And it's just like a clear mistake. And it happened early in the season. And, my excuse was, yeah, like they're learning how to play together and everything, but we're a third way in, and there's no like, it's honestly pretty surprising because like I always think of the Raptors under Nurse as like a defensive minded team, like a really smart defensive team specifically. And that's, to me, the difference this season is that they're just not playing like smart defensively. They have good individual defenders, they do. But like tonight, the Timberwolves, like their ball penetration, it was really too much for the Raptors to handle. Like that play you just showed of Boucher, like I don't know, Anthony Edwards, he's kind of just like special when he gets going downhill. It's really hard to stop something like that. I don't know how much. Yeah, I think it's like there's limitations to a guy like Boucher, and like he was kind of in the right place. He could have been a little deeper on the drop. He didn't flip his hips very fast, and then that's it. Like he blows by him. What do you think about Edwards?
They make a mistake. Like I'm gonna play this clip of like Baines on what's his name? This Spanish point guard, Rubio, right?
Yeah.
And like, fine, you switched Baines onto Rubio, but recover. Like that's a poor matchup for us. Now that you realize that that mistake has been made, like get out of there, like reset so that matchup doesn't persist. But the Raptors aren't even doing that. Like once they concede a matchup, they don't actually make enough efforts to actually switch back and do the right thing after you made the mistake. They almost kind of stick with the plan. And the Timberwolves are pretty good in recognizing those mismatches all game long, whether it be Fred on Cat or whether it be Rubio and Baines. They were just smarter, honestly, and they were more into the game. And I hate to bring it down to like Dwayne Casey level of tactics, but man, I felt like the Timberwolves just were more into the game. Like they got all the 50-50 balls. I think Lowry was the only guy that really, I thought, attacked the rim and put some pressure on the Timberwolves consistently. I thought Siakam could have done more of that, or Nurse should have put Siakam in positions where he could have done more of that. But other than Lowry's like fourth quarter thing where he just like decided I'm going to get to the rim and get fouled and got a couple of dubious calls as well, I just thought the Raptors were not the aggressors and
Yeah.
the Timberwolves were. And I think that alone in a game of basketball will put you in a much better position when it comes to winning the game.
So before we move off the defense, I have like a couple quick points. One of them, shout out to the Dunker Spot podcast with Nikias Duncan. It's a really good new NBA podcast. They were talking about how the NBA, how they think like one of the problems with NBA defenses is that there's too many soft switches. And when I was listening to that, I thought about the Raptors. So like soft switches in the sense that they switch when they don't necessarily have to. So they see a screen coming, and before it even hits them, like they switch. Like I would like to see for a team like the Raptors only switch if you really have to. If you're held up on the screen, then yes, switch. But way too often they get caught in these situations where, you know, a Fred or a Kyle is on a Karl Anthony Towns. And like, yes, those guys are fairly good post defenders, especially Kyle, but still like it's not good defense to have Cat in the post against Kyle Lowry or Fred VanVleet. The second thing is what you were talking about is like scram switches, which is a thing the Boston Celtics do really well, which is when you spot a mismatch, you know, Siakam in this situation could have ran out, tapped Fred and switched with him off ball. The Raptors don't really do that. It's hard to do that when you're not like low, like Fred was here. He's high up in the play, but it's definitely something that if they are going to play this kind of ultra aggressive, like switch everything, you know, happy defense, then maybe some like scram switches would help the Raptors just stay out of situations where they don't need to be as like sending so many guys to the ball and creating these open looks.
I think, but here's the thing with that though. Like, if you ask your players to start like figuring out when to switch, when not to switch, based on like whatever parameters you have in mind, it just makes playing defense more complicated. Like you have to now think about like who it is, what kind of situation it is, and then you switch based on that. I think what Nick Nurse has done is he's actually simplified the defense by saying, well, we're just going to switch more often than not, and in most situations we will concede the switch because that's how we play the game. I think it makes it's that game is very easy to coach and it's very easy to understand by the players because you have a very generic scheme of switching, and that's why it's effective when you have the right personnel to on your team. It's very easy to just put in that kind of scheme because it's easy to understand, it's easy to implement, it's not difficult even as a, you know, as fans, it's not hard for us to analyze the Raptor games. But when you're talking about doing some of the things you just mentioned, I mean, that requires a lot more thinking, a lot more on the feet thinking on when to switch, how to play defenses. And I find Nurse has made a almost a conscious trade-off on whether he wants a simple defense which is easy to understand or a more complicated defense which may not be easy to understand, but if you do understand it, you may get greater benefits.
Yeah. I mean, on one hand, yes. On the other, I think there's a lineup or a rotation here that the Raptors have, a top nine that is full of smart defensive players who could pull off a more complicated scheme. Right now, they're dealing with some injuries, so they're not exactly playing only those players. But like I saw people on Twitter asking for him to simplify it even more. And I think they especially mean the double teams. But you have to remember that if you play like Boucher, especially on Carl Anthony Towns one-on-one, then you're gonna get torn apart in the post, basically. Like you need that aggressive double teams. Maybe there's some times where I think there are some times where there's too much help. But it's rare, I would say, in the sense that the double teams are coming. Let's move on. So real quick on Siakam, you talked about wanting to figure it out better, wanting him to get more touches late in games. I agree on the one hand, like he's become so good in the post this season that yeah, why not give him more touches there? I definitely agree because I mean, look at the numbers and that offense is just more efficient than like Fred VanVleet running a pick and roll, right? On the other hand, what about the idea that Siakam has to kind of like be more demanding himself, not just in the sense that he gets the ball, but like one thing I get frustrated with is he doesn't ever like call for a screen. So like call for Rubio's man to come over so that he can get Rubio onto him so that he can get a switch with Rubio. Instead, he'll just kind of go within the random flow of the offense and then he'll go at guys like Josh Okogie or something that like is a good defender. And it's like, make life a little bit easier on yourself. Why don't you be more like aggressive in getting the guards onto you and then like go from there? Because he's really good if they aren't going to switch. He's good at like finding the pass and making the right decision.
Yes, I do agree. I mean, my whole thing is that Siakam needs more touches in more positions so he can find his game, and he's already fairly dominant, I'd say, in certain positions when we don't put him in those positions. Should he demand the ball more? I think so. I'd like him to. I'm not obviously on the court, so I don't know how much talking he's doing about demanding the ball. But your observation, I think I agree with. I think he can be more assertive when he has the ball, and I almost feel that he has the freedom to actually run the point whenever he wants to. It's not like Nick Nurse is calling plays from the bench that says, okay, this is a play where Siakam gets to handle the ball. It's almost like Siakam's decision on does he want the ball and does he want to make something of it. I almost find he's being a little too unselfish and trying to run the offense through the regular channels of Fred VanVleet and Kyle Lowry. I do think so. I don't think it's Nick Nurse who's necessarily stifling him. I think you are correct. I agree with you. I think Siakam has to do more in asking the ball, especially in situations where he's got a smaller guy with the same weight maybe on him. He can easily take them on the block. And also, his finishing actually has improved this year. I don't think he's as wayward as he was last year with the finishing. So yeah, I know he missed the last shot here, but overall, I think it's just a well that we got to get more water out of.
Yeah. Like most games you would say, like they would have had that if he just hit it and whatever kind of thing. Like they really were right there and they like obviously had a ball go in and out and lost, but at this part in their schedule, that's where you can't lose like these kind of games. Just like two Milwaukee games and two Philadelphia games. I think it's going to be a really interesting part of the schedule, at least for me as like an analyst fan, to kind of see like how do they match up in these next two kind of back-to-back series. So how do they match up straight up with teams like Milwaukee and Philadelphia, who are obviously much bigger than them? So that's a problem unto itself. And B, since they're both kind of back-to-backs, how are they going to adjust after in between the first game and the last game? Like, do they have something extra in them? Maybe do they have a small ball lineup when OG's back that can be effective against those type of teams? Because if you go 0-4 here or 1-3 against two teams that you're going to have to play in the playoffs, that's really discouraging from a let's go for it standpoint, right?
Have to have offensive explosions, really. I mean, that's how you win those. I think their defense obviously has to get better, but they need to. Well, they can't let the opposing team shoot more than 50%. I mean, as a basic requirement to winning those games, you got to get those percentages down. And we talked about the defense enough and how our big men are a problem with that. But I think our guards also have a lot to say. I think they're not helping. I think they're sort of relying a little too much on the big men to sort of figure it out after the turn. And we got to be a little bit more, we got to show more resistance at the dribble penetration spots so we don't let guys in. So that's one thing you could do against, the teams that you mentioned. But on offense, like the Raptors, they are capable of generating some pretty freaking nice offense. And like, I want to show you this one play, which I absolutely loved, right? This is where you have action on both sides of the court. You have Lowry and Siakam on the right side, and you have Fred moving on the left, and Bain setting a screen for Fred to get him open. This is the kind of movement that you would expect of a good Raptors offense, where you're using the entire court. There's ball movement on both sides, and there's ball movement and man movement with purpose. It's not just guys randomly moving and doing decoys and misdirections. It's an actual play to get one guy open at a particular spot. So if we're going to be successful in this 4-game stretch that you're mentioning, our offense sort of has to be clicking at these types of levels. And maybe this is just concentration, maybe better planning, whatever it is. But I do think the Raptors are capable of this. They just got to do it much more consistently than they have.
Yeah, so this is a set play from what I know that they run after like timeouts and stuff sometimes. And like, yeah, Nick Nurse is pretty well known for not running plays in the flow of the game. He really likes his like guys to just be creative and kind of see what they have. But I agree with you that there's a point to be made for maybe running more actual sets in game. And that's when we talk about Siakam, like running pick and roll and stuff like that. Like there has to be more of a conscious effort from the top down for him to do that, because he can't, like you said, like on the one hand, he can be more demanding or whatever, but on the other, like if Baines is like setting a screen at the top of the arc, Siakam just can't, that's not something that's going to work like really well. Like that's not the personnel that's going to help Siakam thrive in those type of situations. So it does come from the top down in terms of like calling plays and putting guys in, I don't know, maybe slightly better decisions. But it's definitely the defense for me that's discouraging, because like, not to go back to it, but we're about to play Embiid. And if you can't shut down Karl Anthony Towns, and Towns like didn't have like a great game offensively, but he actually did when you look at like what he created out of the doubles and out of like the contests. Like, so you just talked about dribbles penetration with the guards. And I think it's true. I don't know how much they can improve. Like you can only be so light on your feet, right? But one thing I think this whole team can improve on from the guards down is the closeouts. So like one thing Karl Anthony Towns kept doing is just like pump faking the three. Boucher or Baines would run past him and bite on it. And then he would drive, and then everyone would collapse. And then he would just pick out whoever he wanted, and they would get an open corner three, right? Like, what have you seen with the closeouts? Do the teams just have like a better book out on us?
I mean, closeouts are definitely have been a problem all year, but I like this play that I'm playing right now is kind of the root of the problem I find here. This is, I mean, let me just cue this up again. This is the one I'm talking about. This is where their bigs is setting a screen on our guards and forcing our big men to go and rotate out, especially Baines. This is Achilles heel type material for the Raptors. And this is where you got to be much more smarter in how you communicate in those situations where it's not a default switch. It's where Lowry actually has to push through here and get to the perimeter, or something else needs to happen. Uh, Regarding the closeouts have
Oh,
been an issue pretty much all year, right? And and I think I talked with this in the Pardon the Corruption show with a bunch of people. That's just how they play, man. They're even against Boston, their strategy is close out hard, challenge the shot, and if the other team happens to drive, we'll deal with it by collapsing. Right? It's a simple. It's a very simple defensive scheme from that perspective, where you're just like, attack wherever the ball is. Can you change that on the fly with the 4 games coming up? Maybe, but I don't think we're going to see anything drastically different. So if I'm thinking of how do we win the next 4 games, I'm more thinking, let's not play transition defense too much. Like, let's not, sorry, that came out the wrong way. Let's not give up too many transition baskets, because against Mini, we gave up way too many of them. So we got to get back on defense, because we're poor enough defensively as it is. But if you throw in a transition aspect to it, things become dicey pretty quickly. So get back on defense is number one. And number two, I think we got to make up for it in more efficient offense. I don't think it's anything more complicated than that. I don't think you're going to fix the closeout aspect in the next few games.
yeah. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, it's disappointing. Because it wasn't like the Timberwolves even played like that great. That's a problem. Like, it wasn't even like they came out and like had a great game plan and like hit every shot. Like, they shot 40% from 3, right? That's not like crazy. The fact that
Crazy.
Toronto
40% from three is not like nothing, man. I mean,
it's
especially when
good.
you're shooting 30%. I mean, that's definitely something, man. Our 3-point defense in general has not been good, because teams have basically caught on to us. And they, like, how many times do you see players like kind of just go a little pump fake and the Raptor defender goes flying by and they hit a three? That seems to be happening more and more as the season progresses, as teams figure out that our strategy is to do just that.
No, for sure. And that's what I was saying about the book maybe being out on them a little bit. And like, maybe that is something that the coaching staff looks to change. I don't know. Like, I just think if you do a better job keeping guys in front of you and you like make them beat you with that 3. So obviously, yeah, you're giving up a better 3, but you're not allowing them to get in the paint as much and force the help. I just think it could help in at least like fatigue wise. Like, they're running all over the place, it feels like, the Raptors on defense, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense where they're running. Last year they ran, like, they were running all over, closing out all over, but it made sense like where guys were rotating to and where they were running. And maybe it's just without, guys like Gasol in there to kind of dictate everything, there's extra help. The trust is a little bit less without like one guy there to really like stir the pot. And I was hoping Siakam would kind of have that kind of game, because he was defending for the most part Jared Vanderbilt, who's not a shooter. So I was thinking, he's going to have a lot of room to play that free safety role this game. But he did a little bit, but I don't know. Overall, I was pretty disappointed by
I mean,
his game today.
I mean, I know we lost to the Timberwolves, which kind of sucks, man, because they are not a good team, man. They have not been playing well. They've lost a bunch in a row. I mean, but I do want to highlight a couple of positives that I think come out of this game, and I fully understand all the commenters in the YouTube section going nuts. I feel you, man. Like, this is not a good night for the Raptors by any standard. This is a pathetic performance. If one of the worst we've seen. However, there were a couple of bright spots, and man, one of them has to be Bembry, because this dude is the Stanley Johnson thing is kind of fading away. Johnson hasn't really been as effective, not really contributing much, missing some open looks. But Bembry, on the other hand, dude, is on fire. Like, he's doing pretty much everything correctly. The play that I'm running right now, this cut that he made after Stanley Johnson had the ball on the block there, is a typical Bembry play, where like he recognizes what's going on, does makes the right cut, catches it, is patient, and finishes it. And I'm not saying Bembry is going to be the answer to everything, but I do see, if the first half of the season is about finding who you are as a team and where you're going to get consistent contribution from, maybe you have sort of taken stock on exactly what you have at this point. You have an idea of what Watanabe gives you. You pretty much know what Bembry can give you night in and night out in terms of consistency and effort. So a lot of the questions that you had earlier on in the preseason on what's capable with these guys have been answered. Right? So there's a lot more information and data available to Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster to actually make a move now. And I think at the same time, these guys have played well enough that they've sort of elevated themselves to being from like nothing to actual maybe some trade value out there. So as the deadline approaches and some of these guys are having good games, we got to look at it in that light too, that this is a general positive on how our role players are playing and what the potential market value is.
Yeah, no, I agree. Bembry is definitely the one bright spot of tonight. I really like his game. And I think Utah also played himself into a rotation spot. Because the thing with Utah and Bembry to an extent, when you look at the numbers, is, I mean, especially Utah, he's such a good closeout guy. He does it so well where he executes the scheme, but he still manages to stay in front of his guy, and if not, to kind of recover. And then the other thing he does really well is rebound, which we know this team desperately lacks, especially when they go small with Boucher at the center spot. So yeah, like it was encouraging to see Bembry come off the bench second today after Boucher. So that kind of puts him in the eighth man spot once Powell is back to the bench or whatever, and OG is back. So yeah, like to go from out of the rotation to the eighth man at this point is definitely encouraging. And I think if Utah is your ninth man, that's a nice rotation if Baines is kind of holding his ground. But someone in the comments was asking what is Masai doing? What's the plan? I think it's impossible for us to say what he's doing without knowing if this team is in the stage where they want to kind of like say this year is a write-off, and not a write-off, but if they want to say this year is kind of like a, transition year, sell off some expirings and then build for the future, or if they kind of think they're right there with the elite of the East. I think it's too early to know, but like I was touching on earlier, I think 4 games from now, we will have a little bit better of an idea where they stack up with the East best.
Difficult to answer that, man, because I wrote the preview for this game and I kind of just riffed on that point. And if you look at some of the pieces on this team, man, they definitely are able to stay competitive. We saw it against the Celtics. The Celtics game was not, the score doesn't reflect how competitive that game really was. So I do feel they can stay tight with good teams, as they have shown they can. I just think they have too many holes at the center. Again, it goes back to the center, where they're able to actually pull off wins, and especially wins in series. So I would imagine, given that you don't necessarily have a potential superstar lined up in the summer, the Giannis talk has gone away, you sort of have to kind of strike while the iron is hot and get somebody who can help now. And it's not like you're going to give up. I mean, you're not going to give up too much because you don't have too much to give up. Like, it's not like we're dangling somebody who we may regret trading later. At worst we trade Powell, and does that hurt us? Maybe a little, but I trust Ujiri and Webster to actually go ahead and pull some sort of a half decent trade, which gives us some big man depth without compromising anything too much. So I would say, even if we're able to get some a breathing body which can move somewhat on defense and just does good defensive rebounding, I think it'll make a bigger impact to the ceiling of this team, even though the acquisition we get might not be like a superstar player or even a star player. I think you just got to make a smart, intelligent move at the big man position, a defensive guy, and I think that will make a lot of the problems sort of diminish.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But I think I'm a little bit lower on the Raptors than I've heard a lot of people kind of talk about recently, because like absolutely they can stay in games with anyone. They've shown that this season, but they've also shown that they can lose to the Timberwolves. And like, Yeah, the Lakers have too. You could say they've lost some bad games, but like they're coasting and it's a different, very different situation. They have injuries. Like with the Raptors, it's like you have to at some point show consistency, right? And that's what I haven't seen from them this season. It's been very, very up and down. And like as someone who puts a lot of weight in the regular season, I just think like until they show that winning consistency, because we've talked about they find various ways to lose games, not that many ways to win them. Like there's been a lot of games like this where they kind of come back down the stretch, but they can't overcome that jump. Like the Grizzlies was one where they did actually come back and pull it off, but many times I think I've seen they're not coming. They're almost getting there, and they give you some hope, and then they don't pull off the comeback. And it's just like there's some very good players on this team, right? No doubt the core four, if you're talking Lowry, Fred, OG, and Siakam, those are high level players, but are they high enough level to carry a team without very much depth at all? Um, you look at like the Celtics as a good example of like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are really all they've really gotten consistency from this season, but they're kind of in another tier of like wing superstardom than OG and Pascal, where I don't trust that team in the playoffs either as currently constructed, but maybe that's just, it's kind of the same problem. Like
Here's an alt theory. I think going back to Siakam, and when you look at the Celtics, and whenever we play them, who are we terrified of the most?
Tatum.
Tatum. Like we're terrified of the guy because it's not just his scoring, it's everything else he does, the mismatches he creates, the 2-on-1 situations he just generates out of nowhere, his passing. And you take, when Tatum is playing poorly, the Celtics become beatable. Like they become fairly easily beatable. Even though they have Brown and Walker and these guys, they become manageable. And I think if you want to make a Raptors comparison, you got to go back to Siakam and say, if you want to go and compete in the playoffs and say you get another big man, you make some sort of trade, what is your ceiling limited by? I would say it's Siakam doing the things that we expect of our number one guy. And right now, he's doing them somewhat consistently. Like the game tonight is sort of, like you don't want to, what is he tonight? Like what's he, 6 for 19, 36 minutes.
Tonight, I think, was a good example of kind of him not having his touch and not being able to find other ways to score, because he did impact the game like as a playmaker, but where is he like getting to the free throw line? Like what else are you doing when your touch isn't falling to kind of impact the game as a scorer?
Great point, man. I mean, we saw Lowry do that, right? That stretch Lowry had where he just like took the game in his hand and tried to just like get to the rim on every single opportunity. And he got a couple of calls against Cat. Eventually, Cat fouled out because of that. That's what's missing from Siakam. You don't see him. You don't see him have like a stretch of 3 or 4 minutes where he just decides, I got to get to the rim. I have to take over. It's my responsibility to take over. We're not seeing that from him. And whether that's him not taking on the challenge or the challenge being too big for him, I just think it's a question of telling the guy maybe that he has the freedom to do that. Maybe I almost find that he's sometimes playing within the constraints that aren't there. Like he thinks the way you play this game is a certain way, go through Fred, go through Lowry, Fred and Baines are setting screens, you stay on the side, and he thinks that's what the offense is about. And the offense is about that a little, but it's also about showcasing Siakam's ability and showcasing his ability to create mismatches and exploiting those mismatches. I don't think he has necessarily internalized that he must do that. So then it falls on the coaching staff to get him to internalize that, so he realizes, this is my time, man. It's a 5-point game. The other team's wobbly. This game is in the balance. It could go either way. What am I doing to elevate myself to win this game? It's almost like he needs a little bit of Kobe sprinkle on him. You know what I mean? You know how Kobe just used to take the game over? Just a little sprinkle of that is what he needs. And I think I look at Nurse and the other guys to tell him that. Like, I think they talk to Siakam with kid gloves a little. I think they gotta change that.
I just don't know if they see it that way. Like it's impossible to tell if he even kind of really wants to be that player, but I also don't know if Fred and Kyle see him as the guy with the ball in their hands in the last 5 minutes of the game. And like when you look at the touches on this Raptors team, Fred and Kyle are like high up there, like top 50 and 20 in the league in touches per game, and Pascal is down near closer to 30 to 40 range, right? Which is kind of surprising given that we know, like you said, the ceiling rests on what can Siakam do in the playoffs, because he is the reason to be excited for the future for the most part. He is the guy with the highest offensive upside by far, because just like Kyle said recently, he's basically a 2 in the body of a power forward. So yeah, I agree. The Kobe thing, like he like we'll end on this, I guess. He needs a little bit more like aggression and want, or just the want to be the guy. But from what I've seen this season, I'm not encouraged, I guess, that he is going to become that by the end of this season. And so for that reason, I think maybe this, like, I'm not going to have any hot takes till after this 4-game stretch. Then I'll come with the burning takes. But until then, like, all I'll say is that maybe because he hasn't necessarily shown that number one option so far this season, maybe they're not actually that close as people think.
Again, I just want to be clear that I don't expect him to take the game over like Kobe. I mean, I'm not saying that. But as you were talking, Oren, I was playing the 2 Kyle Lowry clips where he tied the game with a floater and then got like free throws against Cat. It's just that determination to like get to the rim and make something happen, especially when the team is in these doldrums, these offensive doldrums where they can't get anything going. He's got to start taking a bigger role in those situations. And yeah, I mean, it's as simple as that. I do want to give my TSN turning point. We're looking for a name for this segment. I don't know if you have one, Oren, but I got one here, and I'm going to roll it. And it's the Norm turnover when the Raptors were down 5 trying to make a run. And, Mini gets the ball back here, and Rubio finds, Siakam loses that guy over there, and they get 2 easy points. It goes from potentially 3-point game to a 7-point game, and the Raptors have to kind of fight all over again. I thought that really, really, that one hurt. That one hurt.
Yeah. If anyone has any good ideas for the name of the Raptors Republic turning point, please drop them in the comments of this video, because we are not that creative. We don't have any good ones. I'm seeing some crazy comments about, I'll quickly touch on Kyle because we've been pretty dark, because he was so good today. And like the idea that I want Kyle to have the ball in his hands because exactly what he did today. And like that one steal under the basket from Cat where he threw it out and when it led to the Bembry and one, that was just such a like classic Kyle Lowry play that it was going to be my turning point if they had turned around the game, which to be honest, I expected them to the whole way through, and they never did.
And I was watching as usual the opposing team's feed, and man, I gotta say the Minnesota broadcast crew, one of the best crews to watch. Educational stuff. It's like watching 2 actual analysts talk about the game. You could see that they have watched the Raptors many times during the season. Like they were breaking down plays from the Celtics and comparing it. And, compared to the Raptors crew, man, it's night and day. And I really, somebody check this game out and watch Mini's analysts analyze this game, and you will see what great basketball analysis in play looks like. I just want to give a shout out to those guys because they did a phenomenal job of just breaking everything down. And watching it, I was like freaking, I was being educated about basketball as I was watching that game, which I never find when watching the Raptors crew. But I do want to play one more thing, man, before we go. Remember that play I was talking about where Fred was by default on Cat at the start of the play?
Mm-hmm.
Here it is. Okay. I'll roll it twice. Fred's guarding Cat here. Of course he's going to foul him. Look at the score. This is a critical juncture in the game. I'll replay it here. What the hell? Why is nobody doing something about this situation here? You know what I mean?
I can't see the clip. It's lagging behind a little bit, but I will in a second. Oh yeah, here it comes. Here it comes.
I mean, this is inexcusable, I'd say. I mean, how do you get your point guard on their biggest guy for this long without doing something about it in a 4 point game with a minute left? This to me speaks about a little bit of disorganization, man.
Yeah, it did look like maybe they thought they were in a zone for a second and then he realized he wasn't. I don't know. But yeah, real quick on the broadcast. That's good to hear. I don't really watch a lot of Minnesota games to be honest, so I don't know when the last time I've heard them, but I generally have like a problem with a lot of the local broadcasts and I definitely vote for more of that actual analysis type of content. And I had a note in my notes about how boring the Raptors broadcast was. Like, I agree with you, especially when it's Leo. I like Jack a lot, so I wouldn't go that far, but the Sportsnet broadcast could use some serious work. Like, because they're not doing either of the two things. Okay. At least with Jack, you get good entertainment. So like he's a coach and he'll give you once in a while, like he'll point out they're in a zone and he'll do some basic stuff. But for the most part, it's the entertainment that I like. But with the Sportsnet broadcast, I'm not getting either. I'm not getting X's and O's, and I'm not getting entertainment. So at least bring one of those two. I think it will Raptors fans will enjoy you a lot more.
Yeah, speaking of entertainment, man, I gotta go. I'm watching Succession season 2. So let's wrap this baby up and get some
Yeah.
entertainment.
Yeah, so thanks to our sponsor, Arif Qureshi, for sponsoring the show. Thank you guys for watching. Like the video on YouTube, and we'll be back 2 days from now to